Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Moodle Academy webinar on utilizing the backward design process to rethink a training program. I am Sandra Matz, Events Coordinator at Moodle HQ, and today I'm joined by Amy Sudut, Learning Designer from Moodle HQ in the US team. Our colleague Mary Kuch, Education Manager in the community team, is also joining us today and will help monitor the chat. So please send in your questions anytime during the presentation, and we'll be dedicating some time to answer this. So over to you, Amy, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sandra, for the warm introduction. And thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day to spend meeting with us during this webinar. So today I wanted to kind of go through what this session is going to discuss. I really want to focus on the backwards design model and talking about the model itself and how it was used to transform a government agency new hire program. So that's going to be the basis of us looking at the backwards design model. We're going to focus on the model itself, like I said, the process that we used throughout utilizing this model, and then the Moodle tools that were used at the end. So we're going to be talking about Moodle tools as well as workplace tools and how this model can be used to implement at both core Moodle and workplace Moodle as well. We will also be talking about asynchronous and synchronous learning environments that were created using the model. Again, like Sandra said, if you have questions throughout the session, please don't hesitate to ask. Just put them into the chat. I'll do my best to address those at the time of your questions. And then as well at the end, if you have further questions about the model or about the process, anything that happens to come to mind. Okay. Now let's start off with this statement of need, why the backwards design model was chosen. One of the things that was brought to my attention, is one of the clients of Moodle US was that they wanted to redesign their new hire training process. What we were finding is that whenever people were brought in to the agency, they were given a training model that was having cases of high turnover, and that the new hires really didn't feel prepared for the job that they were taking on. And this may be a struggle, not only in a government agency, but corporate agency. This is one of those things that happens to companies all along in their training. One of the things that we found is that the training model that they were using was very intense. They had a model that was an alternating 3 weeks. They'd have 1 week in person, 1 week off where they do asynchronous learning, another week on of in-person learning. And those in-person learning sessions were 5 days a week, all day long. So they were taking the learners or the new hires out of the out of the workplace environment, putting them into a classroom and giving them as much content as they could possibly obtain, just pouring it all into their brains. And one of the things that we were discussing is, whenever we were talking about the backwards design model with the client was, talking about like cognitive load and what learners can really retain over an amount of time. So we wanted to work with the government agency to ensure that we were having the best approach to designing their training model, because we really wanted to allow the new hires to have a higher transfer of learning, have a high rate of application out in the field, And then hopefully at the end, because they have a possibly slower or at least a higher retention rate of the training, that they will then reduce their turnover rate with the employees. They'll feel better prepared for what they were going to experience in the field. So today, what I want to really showcase with everyone is how we use the backwards design model to shape their new program and the tools that we used along the way. So to begin, we're going to look at the backwards design model. And as you can see, we have 6 steps with the model. And some of them are going to be repetitive. And one of the things that you'll find with the backwards design model is that you can go back and make adjustments to the steps along the way, and then also they can be repeated too. So, and that'll be another thing that we talk about later on with the whenever we talk about the process that was used with this government agency. So the first step of the backwards design model is to define goals, and this again, it can be applied at any type of job situation, any type of learning experience, whether you're teaching in a school, training in corporate or government agencies. Is the first thing that we want to do is define our goals. Let's think about what would you like that new hire or that learner to be able to achieve. And that can be at different stages as well, because you think about your own learning path of like, I want to define a goal. I want to say I would really like to learn this by month 3, or have an understanding of something by month 3, or possibly a year or 3 years or even longer. So whenever you're thinking about defining your goals, think about small goals and large goals at the same time. Think about timing that you would like to see achievement by those new hires. Whenever the next piece that we're going to we'll dive into more in just a minute is sub goals. So after you have defined those major goals, and whether it's at 1 month or 3 years, whatever the case may be, defining those sub goals allows us to break those big goals down. Let's think about how can we achieve that big, massive goal that we may have for our learners. Sometimes setting those goals down, those are difficult because you really have to think about what is this job or what is this learner going to need to be able to do. And this is going to take time. And so we'll talk about how I worked through that with them in just a second. The third step is determine the evidence or assessment that you would like to put into place. How are you going to be able to identify that the learner has developed that required skill or knowledge? And then also with that, determining the evidence is how is it going to be measured by their outcomes. Especially if we're thinking about a job or a task along the way, thinking about how are we going to be able to ensure that they're able to complete that task. And there may be steps along the way. Step 4 is planning those learning activities. This is the fun part. We've defined the goals, we've got the sub goals, then we have our assessment, and then we have to think about, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to ensure that the learner is able to do the assessment? What type of activities are we going to put? We're thinking about asynchronous and synchronous activities. How is the learner going to actively engage with that content? And then step 5 is determine our content needs. Oftentimes, what we find is that whenever people are designing curriculum, they start here. They want to start in step 5. They want to think about, well, this is the content. This is everything that the learner needs to achieve. You can see that in the backwards design model, it is in step 5 that we've kind of put everything into play, and then we're thinking about the content later. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure that we're giving them the appropriate content and not just giving a new hire a manual and saying, read this and learn it. There's more to the success of learning to ensure that we're doing it purposefully. So that's why defining our content is down in step 5. And then that brings us to step 6. And whenever I say that some of these items are repetitive, it's because of step 6. Step 6 is developing that evaluation plan. How are we going to determine whether or not we have had success with our training program? How are we going to, and that is not only for the learner, but the trainer and all the other stakeholders that may be involved as well. So as we are looking at developing that evaluation plan, we may find that the assessment that we used in a spot is not how we would like it, is not getting the results that we want. So we go back to step 3. We look at our evidence that we're putting together for that learner, and then we may reevaluate there, and then that also may reevaluate. That causes to look at the learning activities and the content as well. So these are all tied together, and we're going to walk through this and how this was applied to that government agency. Again, if there's any questions along the way, feel free to put them into the chat. Okay, so we're going to start off by steps 1 and 2. You can see that they're connected. It's all about defining goals. Whenever we are defining those goals, we're thinking about what are we wanting those new hires, our learners, to achieve. Well, the first thing that we have to do is we have to bring all the stakeholders together, not just the trainers or those that are developing the content. We're talking about trainers, managers. In this case, we brought together the Moodle administrators because we're wanting them to have their input as well. We're wanting everybody that is going to have a stake in success of the new hires to be involved, to be able to identify goals that they would have for that learner. And again, these are going to be timeline goals too. We're going to be able to set, in this particular use case, we did 3 months. What would we like them to be after 3 months of exposure within the agency, and then a year, 3 years, and 3 years at the end, because we want to show growth over time. And so what we did is we brought all of the stakeholders together. We used collaboration tools such as Lucid charts and spreadsheets. And whenever we brought everybody together, I asked them simply, what do you want the new hires to achieve? What do you want them to do? And again, sometimes that's a hard question whenever you're trying to think about, this is a big job, and then being able to break it down into smaller pieces. So, and again, you can break this down into smaller sections. So we bring everybody together. We're, basically throwing everything up against the wall. If any of you have worked with collaborative tools, there was lots of virtual sticky notes. Everybody's putting notes along the wall, things that they wanted to accomplish. Then what we realized is that there was a lot of themes coming out of the goals that were put into place. So Then we started moving our goals around and seeing what themes and what patterns were coming out. So then we were able to kind of look at those themes and patterns and define what those goals are. Whenever we're defining goals, another thing that we took into consideration is, are they measurable? We're thinking, those of us that have been in the learning field, you've probably heard of Bloom's taxonomy, through your education process, and you're trying to think of all of the verbs that are used in trying to define, like, what is a measurable goal? Those are things that we're thinking about here when we're defining our goals. We want to make sure, one, that they're applicable to the job, but then also, can we really measure whether or not a new hire is able to complete that task? So those are things that we're looking into. That brings us down to step 2, the sub goals. Whenever we are looking at the sub goals, so we have our main goals in one section. We have them all laid out by topics. We've came to an agreement. And that is another thing that you may want to consider whenever you're bringing all the stakeholders together, is that you're going to want to have clearly defined goals, because you're going to then take those main goals and break them down into smaller sub goals. We're still continuing to work with all of the stakeholders so that they have a voice in what the training is going to look like in the end. We're going to, if you use what I did, we had a nice, wonderful spreadsheet that had the main goal listed out here. And then in the second column was all of the sub goals that were going to flow underneath that main goal, because we're trying to break it down into steps that are achievable by the learner, like little things along the way. If you were to think of it as like riding a bike, for example, your main goal may be maybe can ride their bike one block. Well, in order, a sub goal of that would be learner can get on the bike. Those like little things along the way to know that they're going to be able to achieve that big goal at the end. So we're thinking of those smaller goals, focusing on the various points of training. We're also going to break those down again by a timeline. That is something that is achievable, and then also that you're checking in with the learner. Oftentimes we find with the goals, or whenever you're putting trainings together, you're so focused on what that end result needs to be, and that end result may not be achievable until 6 months or a year later. But putting those smaller goals into place so that you can really check in and make sure that they're meeting expectations along the way is another thing that we want to make sure that we're checking on. So then we'll go to the next piece. And this is the assessment component. Whenever we're determining the evidence or the assessment tools that are going to be used, what we're thinking of is, have the learners or the new hires achieve the skills or knowledge in meeting those goals. So at this point, we're not necessarily thinking about the tools that we should use. We're still focusing on that learner experience, and we're going to think about those tools a little bit later on. I know you're in a Moodle webinar, but I promise we will get to the tools later. But we're really thinking about, how are we going to be able to measure these? Is this something that that we're going to be able to do just a quick check for understanding? Do we need to build some sort of simulation? What is the kind? Oh, we have a question. What is the kind of competency framework for the project? So yes, that's what we're thinking about, is whenever we're trying to think of what is the competency framework, is that we've defined those goals along the way. And then we're going into the next piece of the competency framework, is that we're identifying those key components of being able to identify what the new learner is able to achieve. And then how are we going to be able to measure that? Is that going to be something along the way of like a rubric? And I know I'm getting into tools and such, but we're trying to think of along those lines of, is the learner going to be competent in meeting those goals that we've set in that original phase? The next piece is planning the learning activities. And like I said, this is one of those fun pieces to me, is whenever we're thinking about those learning activities, is we're still thinking our way through the backwards design process. We've thought about our goals, sub goals. Then we're looking at the evidence that we want to get to. How do we want the learner to participate with the content? Like, what type of active, engaging ways do we want the learner to interact with that content? So we plan learning activities that are necessary for the knowledge and skills that we want them to achieve with their goals. So we're thinking about the training, designing activities that are going to be purposeful, that are connected to the evidence and the goals. One of the things that we're finding with the the planning the learning activities, is we don't just want them to read content, we want them to actively engage. So they may need to view, like view a video, but they're being asked to stop along the way and answer questions. And so they're having some live interaction. The learning activities can also be field experiences. One of the things that we've done with the government agency is that we've have a shadowing program along the way, so that not only are they seeing it in reading it from a screen or participating with content along the way, but in order for them to feel more prepared, they're going along with a more veteran employee, and they're seeing how things are taking place. So they're getting field experiences. They're reflecting on those field experiences, and so you're having a more balanced way of involving the learner in the content, so that they're able to kind of have some growth. The next slide is going to be about our content. And like I said, this is a spot where so many of those that have developed training want to start. The subject matter experts are like, "Oh, I have a great article," or "I've want to tell everybody about this and this and this and this." That's wonderful, but we want to make sure that the content that we're delivering to our learners has a purpose. And so what we're thinking about is what content the learners need to complete the learning activities. So everything is building on each other, because whenever earlier I mentioned the idea of cognitive load, and if you're thinking about the amount of information that we're going to give new hires, or anytime, you've probably been there yourself, you take a new job and it seems as though they're like, "And you need to know all of this stuff right now." And it's just a little bit it's overwhelming. There's so much content coming at you. What we wanted to do is we really wanted to think about, okay, what content is absolutely necessary for success in those learning activities and for that assessment. And then with that content as well, you're thinking about what kinds of content. We're thinking about our different kinds of learners. Again, whether or not we want to have it be an item that they just read. Is it something short, digestible, and we're able to get through it? Or is it something that needs to be broken down? It can be in a video. And as a learning designer, my pet peeve is, giving so much information in a long, long video. I like to have everything to be short and chunked so that the learner is able to go through the content. If they need to stop it or pause it, they can. Those are things that we'll want to consider about how that content is delivered. We're also thinking about images. There's a lot of graphic organizers or other kinds of images that can be used to kind of display information and help that visual learner. And then also just audio, if it's something that somebody can listen to, or if you are giving them a document, make sure that they have access to have that document like read to them. Some people are just more auditory type of learners and are able to, better understand if they're hearing it. Okay. I'm going to move on to, like I said, that last step, or step 6, is our developing an evaluation plan. So we're identifying the types of evaluations that we're wanting to measure, that we're wanting to use to measure the success of the program. So you've put everything into place. You've got everything from goals down to content. Now we've got to think about, how are we going to know if this even works? So what we wanted to do is we wanted to develop that evaluation plan. Again, like I've said, bring all of the stakeholders together. Because we want to have input not only from the learners. Oftentimes what we find is that, we'll put a post test into a course, we'll see how the learners did, and that will tell us whether or not we have achieved our goal. Or we put in a survey. Did you like the course? Those types of surveys into the course. And we're getting some feedback, and a lot of that is valuable. We can, both, if they're having success, if you're getting positive course feedback from the learners, that's terrific. But we also wanted to get feedback from the trainers and from the supervisors, because we wanted to see how they are applying what they've learned out in the field. Are they able to take what they've learned inside of their Moodle courses or their classroom courses, whatever the case may be, and then actually apply it? And then we're also have developed tools that include evaluation tools that not only include like rubrics from the trainers and the supervisors, but also we're wanting to look at those long-term statistics to see, are we able to keep employees longer? Do people want to stay in the organization or keep participating in the field? Those are the types of things, whenever you're thinking about an evaluation plan for your training, is not just what you're getting back from the course surveys, but also like the bigger impact to the whole organization. So those are things that you'll want to consider with your evaluation plan. And then again, if there's something that's not working along the way that you're finding out through your evaluation plan, you circle back and you go and you look at whether or not it's a goal that's off, or if it's something such as like your assessment or even your content isn't quite meeting the needs that you're wanting. Okay. Now that we've looked at the whole backwards design process, one of the things that we want to look at next is just the process itself that I used with the government agency. I broke it down into 3 sections. The biggest components for me for success of the backwards design model and the process that we use was collaboration, bringing everybody together, making sure that we're working through this. And that backwards design process involved first, like I was talking about, bringing everybody, all the stakeholders together and having open discussions and the stakeholders can be everything from subject matter experts, supervisors, managers, trainers, Moodle admin, whatever the case may be. We held online meetings regularly. Everybody kind of had homework along the way, and the stakeholders really wanted to have a voice in the success of the training. So because they wanted to have a voice, and even if I had said, okay, really think about this topic of goals, this, over the week, we'd meet at a certain time each week. Those regular cadence meetings really helped, getting on everybody's calendar really helped keep people organized and accountable. We did also use small groups and large groups of stakeholders that could assist with really, whether it was setting goals or creating assessments. Everybody's kind of working together, and we maybe have smaller stakeholder groups then could feed into the large groups if we needed to get additional work done. This is one of the things that happens along the way, is that the backwards design model does take a lot of time, does take a lot of input for quality training to be developed, because you want to have everybody to have a voice and really break everything down. And so because of that, we had, like I said, regular cadence meetings. We also did meet in person. We brought together the stakeholders and those of us that are learning designers from Moodle. And we really wanted to make sure that we had a type of open conversation. Online is a great tool to use. And obviously we're sitting in this and we're all over the world, which is amazing. But being able to bring everybody in the government agency that had a piece in the training, we brought them all into a classroom. And we had whiteboards and notebooks and Post-it notes and everything that you can imagine that a teacher can dream of about putting ideas together. We did that, and we broke down the goals. And there were times whenever, as you're looking back on it in an in-person meeting and you're seeing it physically laid out there, you're like, that goal does not fit there. And we were moving things around, and then we were trying to identify just steps along the way and having those open conversations and side groups. So in-person meetings are valuable, especially if you're taking on a task as trying to reorganize a massive training program such as this. The next thing is organization. We kept everybody organized by using spreadsheets and graphic organizers. We wanted to make sure that people could refer back to items. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the tools that we used was lucid charts because we wanted things to be color coded, and we wanted it to be fun, and we wanted there to be Post-it notes, and we want to be able to move things around virtually. Those are the things that we use to keep everybody organized and also informed. It's important for them to be able, for all the stakeholders to be able to go back and look at what you've been talking about the last week. Especially if you're only meeting once a week or maybe even twice a week, it's like, oh, what did I say in that last meeting? That organization is critical. Tools is that third section that I feel is the most important. Tools, all throughout the process, I kept reminding them, don't think about the tools. Think about the learning first. Then then we'll come back and we'll think about the tools that are necessary. And we came up with some really cool ones. We used Moodle tools for this integration. Then we also, tools can also be things that we just use to keep ourselves organized. But the asynchronous and synchronous tools, that were going to be necessary to reach our goals. And there can be a variety of Moodle tools, and we'll get to those in just a second. Then I wanted to kind of show you what our approach ended up looking like. You can see we've got 3 tiers. We've got yellow, purple and blue as going to be our tiers. So we had the learners complete asynchronous. It's going to be a very hybrid approach, asynchronous and synchronous learning experiences at each level. We noted that they're going to, there's certain items that needed to be completed before others, and everything was going to flow into the different courses. So as we're thinking about this, we're thinking about the coursework along the way. We're thinking about the asynchronous activities. We also had Zoom sessions for those synchronous components. Those are going to take place at the same time as those asynchronous sessions, because we want them to have some, check-ins with their trainers, and then also final assessments. So what's going to happen is they're going to complete the level 1 work. They're going to do the final assessment for that level, and then they would move on to the next tier. And then they'd be able to work through those as well. So that was kind of our approach to that multi-level learning model. Then we're finally here. We're finally here to the Moodle course tools. You're going to see we used a lot of basic Moodle tools that are just brought in to the to the courses. We used lessons. Lessons allowed us to do branching, present content checks along the way. Very, very simple types of lessons that we wanted to build. We also this allows us to put together a lot of asynchronous activities. The learner goes through them. Then we also have H5P activities. Those H5Ps allowed us to do, again, if you wanted to do a branching activity or a course presentation, we also used interactive video, and so that they could have content presented to them in different ways. Also, just interactivity video with drag and drop type of activities, matching those types of things to kind of clean up, make it more interactive learning experience. We used database tools allowed us to collect and share experiences and evidence from our learners. We used your basic quizzes and assessments as well, and assignments for those assessments, so that we're really checking in, making sure that the learners are achieving what we're wanting them to gain. We're using the rubric tool inside of assignment so that everybody's having consistent grading. Next is synchronous activities. Those synchronous activities can be the Zoom integration, so that the trainers are able to check in with the learners along the way. We really wanted to make sure that the trainers and the new hires were able to interact regularly. So oftentimes in this case, they're checking in with their learners twice a week while they're doing their asynchronous learning activities. One, to make sure that they're completing their asynchronous activities along the way. And then also just kind of getting to kind of have like a flipped classroom model. They're still training and still doing sessions. And those sessions are often an hour and a half, so that they're able to work on their asynchronous work, have some synchronous activities, and then also go out and do some field experiences along the way. So that's how we're using the synchronous Zoom integration. We also used a tool. This is outside of Moodle. It is called Go React. It's an integration that, an LTI integration that we've brought in. What we're able to do is do live simulations with the trainees so that they're able to participate in a safe environment and go through what they would be experiencing out in the field. There's rubrics that are used. They're able to watch the videos of their simulation. They're also able to do peer reviews of the simulations as well, so that they're able to kind of check in and help guide their new trainees as well. So that's how we're using Go React. Also, in-person trainings, you still can't get away from those. In-person training, we're bringing them together. But instead, if you remember at the beginning, I said they would spend like a full week in and just completely dumping content in. What we're doing is it's not until the very end, after they have that strong content base, and they've had synchronous sessions through Zoom prior to, then they come in person towards the end, not until tier 3, that we really try to dive in and do a live training session with them over a couple of days, and it's broken down into various models. Okay. Then, plugins that we're using and some of the features. And again, you can do this in core and you can do this in Workplace. I've done it with both with the same organization. They transferred over to Workplace after a time. But with the core, what we did is we created a home hub for each tier. We used the subcourse plugin and we linked those courses that we had created into that hub. That allowed the trainer and the new hire to really be able to track their progress along the way. So, the subcourse plugin, we're able to see that whether or not a course is complete. We're able to do the activity locking so that they're not able to get into that new course until the previous course had been completed. We did course completion enrollment. So if they were able to complete a previous course that was required, then once that course was completed, then they were enrolled into the next course as well. Like I said, activities restrictions, those are key. That's just built in. Auto grouping. One of the things is that, we're having cohorts of new hires move through. We put things into their profile field, identifying the cohort in which they belonged, then using the auto grouping plugin that put them into the correct group. Trainers could see and monitor within their own group inside of the courses and really be able to track their progress. And then configurable reports, writing a couple of SQL reports so that we're able to really monitor and focus in on this new hire training program, given the fields that they need. Given that it is a government agency, there was a lot of reporting that was necessary, a lot of things that was required by our government. Workplace, whenever we had decided to implement their Workplace, we decided that we're going to use programs to organize those tiers, and we're able to then use the courses and the sets in order to control access. Or when we wanted the users to be able to access certain courses, we're able to track that program completion as well. So that was a nice tool that we could use to organize our courses. Dynamic rules. This also allows for a lot of the automation pieces to come into play. We're able to say if you belong to a certain cohort, you're put into a certain program. If you've completed a program, then you're automatically enrolled into the next tier. Those types of automation phases are nice to have because we're able to then it's less demand on the Moodle administrator to kind of move people around. And then lastly, we have the reporting. The trainers are able to receive reports weekly. They're able to look up the reports as well and be able to really track each person's progress through the courses without having to go too far into the courses themselves. So it's nice. The trainers really appreciate that overview that they're able to achieve, as well as the managers and the supervisors through the org structure that's set up. They're able to see that reporting as well for those new hires and ensure that they are working through the whole entire process. Okay, I've been talking a lot, and I would love if there was any questions about the backwards design model, about the process that was used with the government agency, or just any of the Moodle tools as well. So if you have any questions, it's a great time to jump in.
Yes, thank you, Amy. We can wait a few minutes to see if there's any questions coming in. But it was so good to see the whole detailed process. So nice. I actually missed your presentation at the recent global event that we had in Mexico. So it was so nice to see an extended version of this.
Thank you. Thank you. In Mexico is much shorter, the abbreviated version.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you for letting me discuss longer.
Of course.
Someone has a question about GoReact. GoReact is, like I said, that's an external tool that we use to LTI into the Moodle instance. And what GoReact does is it is a video capturing system. And what we've done with it is we have a simulation that takes place. We bring in the government agency brings in live actors to role play or role playing, and then the new hire interacts with those that are role playing, and then we also have people that are brought in to grade. And so they're able to use that rubric. Then the recording can then be released to the group, and you can assign peers to review the sessions, and then they're also able to place comments. You can have a rubric for the peers to use, but then they're also able to place comments on those recording sessions, as a way to like encourage peers, or like, oh, this is, I like how you did some, like approached it in this manner. I hadn't thought about that before, or just keep up the good work. And that is kind of how GoReact works. As far as that's how we're using it. It's a fun tool.
Yeah, and we have a comment from Mary saying it was nice that you share how you can do it with LMS Moodle and also with Workplace.
Yeah, it is. It was nice in this use case that it went from core Moodle to Workplace. So it is the model that doesn't change. That can be applied to any type of learning, but the actual application and putting it into Moodle is very easy in whether you have core or you have Workplace. And yes, the recording will be available. So if you missed a section, it'll be available in a few days.
So if you have enjoyed this session, we'd love you to consider getting involved further and help us grow by contributing to the development of Moodle Academy. You can do this by visiting our Get Involved course, which we will find in the front page of the Moodle Academy site. You can suggest ideas for new webinars and courses, and you can vote on ideas that have already been suggested by others. We're always on the lookout for community members to help present webinars and co-create short online courses. And we'd love your help making Moodle Academy more inclusive. So if you're able to, please jump into our Translate Moodle Academy course and get started with helping us translate our courses and webinars into other languages. And of course, please help spread the word about Moodle Academy by telling your colleagues about the courses we offer and the webinars we run. When you complete a course, you will earn a badge. Educators might like to think about getting involved with the Moodle Educator qualification, previously known as Moodle Educator certification. You can take the Are You Ready for the MEQ, previously MEC, quiz, and one of our certified service providers will support you through the certification process. Also, keep an eye for the Moodle Administrator qualification that will become available in early 2025. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Amy, especially for being here. I hope you find the session useful, and I hope to see you on the Moodle Academy course forums and in our coming webinars. So thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. Bye for now.